Okay, Mr. Ritzky, if you'd take your seat, I'd appreciate it. We're going to call the meeting to order. This is the Human Services Committee. It's Monday, October 2nd, 2017. It is 7:20 p.m. We do have a quorum. The first item on the agenda is approval of meeting minutes of September 6th. Is there a motion to?
Second.
Any changes or corrections? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that passes. So we've got 4 people who are signed up to speak. You get 3 minutes apiece. It's Juned Ritzky, Rebecca Mendoza, Karen Cartwright, and Lillian Salcido. So if you could come up and...
Some of these pertain to human services, some of this pertains to the city in general. I feel too many residents do not understand what is going on here with government. I think there's a indication the city manager and staff may not want us to understand. At the last council, the city purchased body cameras, and I'm not against that, by the way, using long-term debt. Put simply, this is using a mortgage to buy groceries. Residents are about to see huge increases in their water bills for waste disposal. Of course, in the past, when this was done last time, staff used numbers that were highly inflated. I believe almost close to $900,000 in yard waste sticker sales, which transferred to about a third of that. We are now in a lawsuit, obviously, with Skokie about water sales. For the last 5 years, I've asked that we basically get a consultant in here to figure out what's going on with the water department. I think what's extremely critical here is when you go to court and you can't figure out what's going on and the judge asks, it's going to be very, very interesting. I really ask yourselves, if the people here can't run the basic operations of the city correctly, how are we going to create equity and changes to the police department that serves the public? Of course, you can hire people like an equity coordinator or another consultant to train police officers, but these have high costs and I believe little results. I think what I find disturbing with a lot of this is the council should set the agenda with these things, not an equity coordinator or a consultant. The equity coordinator, though, did state something that, of course, has troubled me and has been one of my issues, and that's Harley Clark claiming this was an equity issue. I believe the former mayor and certain council members have turned this into actually a racial issue, though they don't quite come out and say that. Council and staff has been using, say there's really no funds for Harley Clark, but they've never used any funds on Harley Clark. And at one point here, this was stated that maybe we couldn't get the HVAC done at Fleetwood Jourdain because of Harley Clark. Of course, that's really not true. What happened with Fleetwood Jourdain, anyone can look at it and figure it out. City staff didn't create the correct estimate or proposal, and when they only got one bidder, and clearly they changed the scope, and they had to put more money into this whole thing, and they mentioned this, but I think that's a problem. I think council members claiming that certain residents aren't welcome at the beach or Harley Clark, to me, I would have to ask those council members, why aren't you correcting this, and rather than doing nothing? I think we need to, if you really want to look at ways, we need to increase access to the beaches and services rather than creating what I would call racial excuses for political purposes. And I think that's very troubling when we try to use racial excuses to get political ways here. And that's a very serious problem rather than dealing with facts and the truth. And I keep on saying the city is maybe both ethically and financially bankrupt. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ritzky. Ms. Mendoza, Ms. Cartwright, and Salcido.
Hello, good evening. I'm here to talk about the Equity and Empowerment Plan. I reviewed the updated version, and I'm a little bit concerned that there is not enough emphasis on empowerment. And it looks like there's been a significant amount of attention to HR issues around equity and training, and I applaud the city for doing that. And I think that's possibly something that the HR department could have taken on their own as an item of importance. I feel confident that as a city we're doing an incredible job in that area, but I'm missing the empowerment. And so I was here a month ago to talk about the 3 issues that I feel are really pressing in our community when it comes to empowering members like myself to be able to live in this community. Affordable housing was one of them. Employment opportunities was another one. And just the basic of just treatment from the city to the members, especially for members that don't speak another language. At the meeting last month, you approved signs to say that this is a welcoming community. And I don't know if we're able to put up those signs just yet. So I think that that decision was a bit premature. And it would have been nice as a way to celebrate the closure of the work that's going to be done through this equity and empowerment work. I think that a lot of money is going to go into those signs, and I don't necessarily think that those signs going up now really are the truth of what they state. Additionally, there was some translation around the signs, and we're going to invest more money in translating those signs, and I would encourage you to reach out to local people that might be able to translate, or there's a thing called a dictionary, and that could also help to translate everyone is welcome here. So I do this work internationally. I do economic and community development internationally, and what's very important through anybody that applies for such a project through the work that I do is a community needs assessment. And I don't think that that has been thoroughly done. And I would just implore the city and the individuals that are in charge of this to just look within the city's records, look within the history of our city, what we have done, what hasn't worked, what has worked, and start from there. I think that we really are wasting a lot of time and empowering people that, like myself, who might not be able to afford to live in Evanston beyond 2 years. So it really is urgent that there's an emphasis to the empowerment of the community through this work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cartwright and Ms. Salcido.
Hi. How are you? Nice to be here. I had a few questions from this evening's packet. I was happy to see the reporting of contact card data, but I found it confusing because there were a mix of percentages and numbers reported, which makes it very hard to take a quick look and see what the data is telling us. So I prepared a different chart, but there was a typo in my spreadsheet which made all the entries wrong, so I cannot give it to you, but maybe I'll email it. What we see is that 67% of the juveniles that are stopped are African American, and 29% of them are white. Interestingly, we see that even though we have far more black youth being stopped than white youth, they're arrested at half the rate, and there is any kind of action taken at 1/3 the rate. So my conclusion is that we're having too many contacts with black kids because they're not bearing any fruit. So I invite you guys to think about that. And then I had two things that from the complaint records that I wanted to react to. One, I don't know the difference between a complaint register and a departmental inquiry, and these are the two categories that I see month after month in the reports, and I couldn't find any definition of them online. So it would be interesting if we could get an explanation of that. In the report labeled D117-02, the complainant alleged that he received poor treatment by one or more police officers, I can't remember, because he's black. Right below that, it states that if the allegations were upheld, that these officers would be in violation of Rule 6 and Rule 30, which are incompetency or inefficiency and failure to promptly process or inventory recovered property. What I want to know is why they would not be in violation of Rule 74, which is the rule that prohibits differential treatment due to race. If the complaint is about being mistreated due to race, I don't know why that rule wasn't listed. And I also wanted to note that the complaints received dispositions from 10 members of CPAC. The CPAC page on the city website said that it is a committee of no fewer than 4 and no more than 9 members. So I'm not sure why there is a 10th member on CPAC, and I'd be interested to get an understanding of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Liliana Salcido, and I'm with Open Communities, and I'm here for the Equity and Empowerment Plan. And as a Latina, I'm very concerned about that the Latinx community make their voices heard in the equity plan. As Rebecca said, I'm worried that the welcoming signs are not enough to create change in how the city employees see the Latino community. I am really think that the Latino community deserves more. And if it's someone who understands the Latino problematic, maybe a liaison like the school district does, or maybe a Latino engagement coordinator, someone who really understands the cultural problematic or the Latin issues, someone who speaks the language, and someone who they can relate to directly in case of any other problem in the city. As a Latinx, I understand that the Latino people many times come to the city, but if they are not treated well, they are not coming back, and they are going to look another way to solve the problem. So I really think that a person who speaks their language and understands the problematic will be great in this plan. And I was reviewing the Equity and Empowerment new plan, and it talks about, in the part 3, where it talks about community engagement, it says 3 focus groups. I don't think that these 3 focus groups are gonna be totally empathic with the Latino community. We need someone who really understands, who really knows all the barriers that the community goes through. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's the end of citizen comment. We're going to go right into items for consideration. HH1 is, let me get back to it here.
Do you have an agenda?
Yes.
I do. Okay, it is the commemorative plaque policy for the city of Evanston. Staff, per council request, outlines a policy to place commemorative plaques within the city of Evanston. Staff also recommends that Human Services Committee accept the request by North Shore University Health System to place a commemorative plaque at the location of the First Evanston Hospital at 806 Emerson. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve?
Is there a second? Okay. I'd like to speak to this if there's not anyone else who wants to. The plaques that are in your packet, all of them are in the first ward, which is wonderful, and we get to be a historic ward, which I really appreciate. And I think we absolutely do need a policy, as we discussed last time. The types of plaques, the one at Who's Drug Store, the Davis Street Fish Market, and the other one at Bookman's Alley, all of them came to us with a request to place a plaque on private property. So there needs to be some communication between the organization seeking to place the plaque and the private property owner, and we need to make sure that that's in the application. The other thing I would like to make certain of is that the application talk about the difference between honorary street names, which, as this committee has discussed at previous meetings, is to honor those individuals, those everyday citizens who make an extraordinary contribution to the city of Evanston, the postman, the barber, the volunteer, those people, not for organizations or groups or historical figures. So it has to be a living person. And so I'd like that to be delineated in this application too, that this application is strictly for historical plaques. And I think that the other thing that we really need to do is, in the case of the North Shore University Health System plaque, where they want to locate that is at 806 Emerson. That is, again, now private property, where Sherman Gardens stands. And I talked to one of the trustees. They're having their trustee meeting tonight. They had not heard a thing about it. So if even it's being considered to go on the wall of that building, there needs to be some communication. So I'm hopeful that we will hold this in committee until our next meeting to allow the hospital to reach out to the building. It happens to be a co-op, so they do have a board of trustees that manages that building. And if it's going to go on public property, I would like to know where the site is. If it's going to go in the parkway, there's the parkway at that location. It's not a whole lot of parkway. And so I would like to have an application that shows the location of it. So those are my concerns and my suggestions. Alderman Simmons?
Thank you. And are we talking about the street signs also?
No.
Okay.
No, we're just talking about the bronze plaques.
Okay, then never mind.
What did you want to say about street signs?
Well, I'd like to make a recommendation that I understand the street signs that are in honor of a significant resident is a 10-year life on there, and I would like to make a recommendation that we honor them while they are still here serving and not take them down if they're still serving the community in the way that they were first honored with the street sign.
Okay. I think as Alderman, you probably certainly could make the suggestion that honorary street name remain. Okay.
Alderman Fisk,
Am I
members
right?
of the committee, good evening. Yeah, I think the last time that this issue was discussed, there was a request that we review with each ward alderman for those individuals that were still living. Some of them have passed since the time had come up, so we were going to do that. I don't believe we have, quite honestly, got that far yet. So we will review that with you. And I think the direction I received from the committee was that if the feeling was that there needed to be an extension, that we would have an extension. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
And deal with it as a ward by ward.
Yep.
Thank you.
Issue. Alderman Fisk, members of the committee, if I may, just one additional issue regarding the plaques. Thank you for the time this evening to go through the proposed policy. We have been working with North Shore Community Health System for several months on this. If we are able to do as the chair has requested, could we come back to the full council with that particular plaque? And then have the policy come back to this committee. I know that they're anxious to do this before the end of the year. Their chief executive is retiring, the board president, the gentleman that Kimberly's been working with, a longtime Evanston resident who's served for a long time as their board chair, is leaving as well at the end of the year. So there's many factors with North Shore that they would like to do this
Right.
before the end of the year.
The trustees at Sherman Gardens, when I talked to them, I said, please bring this up at your meeting tonight. This is all the information that I have right now. I have not seen what the plaque is going to look like, obviously they want to know. They are willing, while they're having their monthly meeting tonight, they're willing to have a mid-month meeting.
That'd be great.
And so, but the hospital really needs to reach out to them and
And they have been following, the hospital's been following our lead. They realize that what they've requested has been something that's been a little non-standard, and this committee's asked for us to make it standard, so we're happy to do that.
Yeah.
So if it's all right with the committee, if we're able to get this resolved with the building and with North Shore, if we could bring it back to the full council
Yes.
before the end of October, we would appreciate
Yes.
that. And then
Is
we'll
that-
bring the policy back with those changes
Okay.
to your November meeting.
Okay, is that okay with everybody?
Great. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Yes, thank you, Wally. Okay, Wally, I would just like to see a draft of that incorporating the changes before it comes back, so.
Draft of the plaque, a draft of
No,
the
a draft
policy?
of the application form, and just so that we've got everything all together and that.
Certainly, we'll share that with the committee prior to the agenda packet going out, and it'll also then be in the agenda packet.
Okay, all right, great. Okay, that was our only item for consideration. So we've given direction to the city manager. I don't think we need to vote on that.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to assume that whoever made the motion is going to withdraw it, and the second is withdrawing. I think, didn't we do a
moved it.
motion and second?
I can withdraw it.
Okay, all right, that's good. That's good housekeeping. Big on housekeeping. Okay, so we're going to move to items for discussion. The first item, Chief, could I call you up? The chief has asked to speak with us tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Chairman and members of the dais. The police issues work plan will be covered by Deputy Chief Pickett, and the complaints will be covered by Commander Wright. I asked for a couple of minutes to address the committee and the community on two issues. The first one, the Beatty complaint will not be addressed tonight as CPAC asked for continuation from its special meeting to its regular meeting meeting to give a review of that matter their full attention. I think that it kind of put off our timeline a little bit, so we're slated to have that back in for the November meeting. The second issue I want to address is there's been some misinformation about police department and FOIA-related matters. I want to call to the attention of the public and the committee that the police department has trained and experienced FOIA officers that understand their job very well and have been doing it in a professional manner for a number of years. Further, I think that our sensitivity to the victims is of paramount importance. There are events that happen in all of our homes that that person may need to know exactly what's in that police report, but I'm not sure everybody in the World Wide Web needs to know. And so as we move towards resolving that issue, I want to assure the members of the committee and the community, the police department understands its responsibility when it comes to FOIA. We are not screening or monitoring anything that has to do with officer conduct. Our focus is on avoiding re-victimizing victims in those inquiries. I appreciate the time and the courtesy for the ability to comment like this, and Deputy Chief Pickett will walk you through the work plan. Thank you.
I think Alderman Braithwaite has a question.
Chief, thank you for your comments. Just one quick question. So who in your department is responsible for redacting that information before it goes out?
The person that handles the bulk of those duties is Sarah Jones.
Okay.
She's been in that position for over 5 years, has an excellent background in IUCR, which is our crime reporting data to the state, and also has been to multiple trainings and multiple years of experience in managing this data and being respectful to the requesters of the data. To get to the heart of the matter, if you are a legal representative of someone and ask for a police document, it's redacted in a different manner than if you're an uninvolved party that may have some legal access to the document. And I think that's where we're getting our wires crossed, that victims need to know what we wrote down. Not everybody needs to know what we wrote down.
Right. Okay.
Thank you again for the courtesy.
Thank you.
Chief, just one more minute. Alderman Fleming has a question.
I do. Not regarding the FOIA, but can you just clarify when you will be bringing forward the answers to Ms. Hartman's questions? Are you doing that with the review of the Beatty case, or are you doing that at council?
I imagine that will be rolled into the HSC meeting when Beatty is...
So in November?
In November, but once again, I am mindful of the time constraints of these gatherings. I'm under no illusion that will be a quick get-together. And so it will have the answers prepared, we'll be ready to do it, and focused on the questions that are on point to this matter, and see if we can get through those the same night, because they seem to be fellow travelers.
Yes, and if you can't, with the time constraint, get through all of the, verbally give us the answers, can you bring them printed?
Sure, absolutely.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Chief. Okay, so the first item for discussion is HH2. It's the Police Issues Work Plan Update.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. James Pickett, Deputy Chief, Field Operations. I have just two quick updates since the last time this was discussed. Direct your attention to number 4, the Cook County Sheriff's Department Crisis Intervention Team Training. During the last update, 13 officers had attended. Since that time, 2 additional officers have been trained. 2 more will be trained during the study session from October 16th through the 20th. And then hopefully we'll get 2 more inside the class on December 4th through the 8th. And if I could direct your attention to item number 17, the Civic Center office hours. It used to be held in room G203. That has been changed to room 3601. And it's still calling for an appointment, and that will still be between 9:30 and 6 p.m. So those are the 2 only updates since the last time we met.
Okay, Alderman Fleming.
Can you all look at, when you look at number 5 for the training by Officer Logan and the focus group, it's now scheduled for November the 9th?
Correct.
I don't have my exact calendar, but that might be the night we're going to have the HSC meeting, is that correct? Is the 9th So is it possible that we can move that, assuming that people would like to hear about the pending review of the case and also
And
go
plus
to a
we
town
wanna-
hall?
I'm sure that won't be a problem, but I'll discuss it with the chief and see if we can get that moved.
All right, my next question. So there's 23 and there's a couple of things in here that are pending Lexipol implementation. Do you know where we are with Lexipol
Well,
implementation?
you know what? Every officer has been given the password and been able to go inside it and study it, and it's just like our old general orders. So all the officers and staff have been given access to that. So actually, that should have been implemented, but I'll make sure I get back to you on that one.
So you mean 23 and 24?
23.
Right? Those are the things that I see
Correct.
still.
Okay.
We need to correct the date of the next
Oh, I don't
Human
have another
Services
date. in
meeting.
there.
It's on November 6th.
Oh, okay, thank you. So I had the 9th in mind, sorry. Okay, so 23 and 24, they are working on those now?
Correct.
And do you have an idea of when all of the staff will be finished with those?
Actually, I will get back to you tomorrow on that, and I have an answer for you.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Did the city manager leave?
Mr. City Manager, are you listening to us somewhere? If you are, could you scamper out here? Here he is.
Sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Just a quick question. It's on the plan is item number 14. Do we have a proposed date when the Citizens Complaint Working Group plans to meet?
Ms. Richardson?
Yes, our first meeting is going to be held next week, Thursday, October 12th at 6 p.m.
And Madam Chair, if maybe we could just let Ms. Richardson explain how we're going to operate the committee, at least as we know right now,
that
and
would be-
the web resources for people if they're interested in getting agendas or other materials.
Sure. So, as I stated, the first meeting will be held on October 12th at 6 p.m. here at the City Civic Center. We will have, it has its own designated web page under boards and commissions, and we will have our meetings agendas as well as minutes posted there, and any additional materials that are packets a part of the meeting. We haven't set a schedule yet for the duration, but once the schedule is set, we will share it with HSC.
And Ms. Richardson, it's my understanding that Mayor Haggerty plans to appoint a chair prior to the first meeting?
Yes, that is correct. One has yet to be appointed.
Thank you. Will it be every second Thursday?
At this time, we're not believing it's going to be on a Thursday. It was just the first meeting needed to be scheduled, and so that was the date everyone was able to agree upon.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, we'll move ahead to HH3, which is review of police complaints. Any questions? Alderman Fleming?
Yes, I'm sorry, I don't have the page open. So I have a question about DI 1702. So I met with Officer Leaks to go through this since I wasn't able to go to CPAC meeting. And my concern was also actually voiced by Karen Courtwright in terms of part of the allegation was that he was just, there was racial bias by him being African American, and that was not listed in the complaint. And so I did communicate with the chief and OPS officers that I would like us to list rule number 74 if that is something that our citizens complain of, even if there's no further detail given. I would like us to investigate that, which the officer said they do, but I think it's worth it for us writing it down, even if we find that there is nothing there. My other concern was in the complaint, it lists the bottom of page 32 that there was a DV or CVD that was inventoried from the Food for Less that the complainant said would show, you know, this accident, and that we inventoried that, but later on there was some discrepancy as to if we had it, if we didn't have it, if, you know, where it is now. And so I think that rule, which I think is 30, I might be wrong, I'm sorry, we need to look at again, because that would, to me, would show that we did not, that something happened with some evidence that was maybe an error on our part.
Okay, Alderman Braithwaite?
I'm sorry, this is going back to the last issue before you speak. I just wanted to know if there was an automatic Alderman liaison to the complaint working group.
Yes.
Yes? Oh, good. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, we'll jump over to HH4, which is Equity and Empowerment Update.
But is Officer Wright, I'm sorry, I haven't done this before. Do we address that, or do we just change it? What happens with the ruling for the complaint? I don't know.
What do we do? Henry?
Madam Chair and Human Service Committee, Henry Ford, Assistant City Attorney, as previously reported to the committee in my memo last time, there is nothing for you all to do other than to accept the report, and that's it.
Braithwaite.
I mean, I'd like to think if it's, again, we're in a hypothetical world, but if it's that serious, then we can refer something back to HR, correct?
That's not our job. I mean,
This was the, Alderman Fleming kind of raised this issue.
Right.
Upon first coming on the committee in terms of what this committee's role was in terms of assessing police discipline. And as previously stated, that's not the authority of this committee to issue discipline. So I would need some more clarification as to Alderman Fleming's, what is she specifically requesting? If she's requesting for the police to review its policies and procedures concerning reviewing police complaints for allegations of racial bias and discrimination, and including that Rule 74 going forward, even if there's no evidence of the same, or if there is evidence of the same, then that's something that this committee can refer back to that subcommittee. However, in terms of discipline to the specific officers, pursuant to the personnel manuals, the Uniform Peace Officers Act, that's not this committee's role. It's not the power of the council.
Okay, so to clarify, I'm not asking in terms of discipline.
Right.
I was giving, and maybe because I wasn't at the CPAC meeting, but I was questioning the finding for that rule. So I understand that I am not handing out discipline recommendations for the officer, but I guess understood that although we are not ruling on these per se, that these come to human service, these complaints come to this committee and we accept them, but then we also have the power to look at evidence and, video and whatever else, and to give feedback or input. Is that incorrect?
That is not my understanding of what our discussions have been. So that's not my recollection.
All right, so then I will speak, I suppose, to the OPS officers about my concern, since I'm the liaison for that committee. Is that how we can do it?
You can always, that's fine. That's fine, Council.
All right, and so then back then to Rule 74, I would like this committee, I suppose, is what you're directing me to have a discussion, give some direction on making sure that Rule 74 is listed as a rule in which we're investigating when a complaint comes in, and it is
And just as
part
a
of the
point
complaint.
just as a point of information, will you please repeat what Rule 74 is?
Rule 74 is
Thank you.
subject, the complaint would be subject any person or group, or allow any person or group to be subjected to any form of harassment, discrimination, prejudice, or bias on the basis of race, ethnic background, sex, age, religion, or any other personal characteristic, belief, or affiliation. And so I would like to have our OPS team ensure that complaint, Rule number 74, is always considered and always listed when a citizen brings that up in their complaint.
If I may, Madam Chair, members of the committee, just to give you some history behind Rule 74, I think it was mentioned earlier between the different types of complaints, DIs and complaint registers. A DI is a departmental inquiry, which gives the department latitude to inquire into cases to make sure, for purposes of mitigating a citizen complaint or seeing if a formal investigation is necessary. A complaint register is an actual formal investigation where a complainant actually comes in, they sign a complaint, it's a sworn affidavit, which is required by the statute for us to proceed with a formal investigation, interrogate the officer, and the complainant also avails himself to the Office of Professional Standards for an interview. In past practices with Rule 74, as well as other serious violations like excessive force, criminal statutes that are alleged against officers, we require that someone comes in, sign the affidavit, which is the officer's right per the statute, and submit themselves to an interview. We don't proceed with formal investigations with those allegations because those are allegations which typically will lead to in excess of 3 days off or possibly termination. In this case, the complainant refused to avail himself at all, refused to come in and sign a sworn affidavit. So I did do it in part the departmental inquiry in this incident. I looked at everything, all the facts, and nothing in my inquiry revealed that this was based on race or racial bias. As a matter of fact, the only thing the complainant could tell me over the phone was that that's what he believed. So I didn't discount his complaint. I actually wrote it up in my narrative and I sent it down to the supervisors. The reason why the Rule 6 and the Rule 30 violations are in there is because that was revealed in the departmental inquiry. But in past practice for these serious allegations, we don't attach these to the officers unless the complainant is willing to come in and sign a sworn affidavit, which is that officer's protections per the state statute.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Commander Wright, within your tenure in this position, when was the last time that an officer has been I don't know if guilty or just founded with the Rule 74?
I don't believe I've ever taken a Rule 74 violation in my 2 years in OPS. I would actually have to go back and check the records to see when was the last time we had an actual complaint which alleged that violation.
I think that would be good information to know,
Okay.
sir. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Fleming.
Sorry, Judy.
That's
So I understand some of this process is a little bit confusing, but what I know is that if someone goes online, comes in, however they make their complaint, they are expecting us to investigate that fully, which you said you did, and it's listed here. I think where the disconnect for me comes in is if I come in and I say, I was stopped and given a traffic ticket because I'm a woman, if that's how I feel, whether or not I have some proof of that, right, I expect you all as OPS to investigate that. And so I think that is the expectation, and that is what I would like to communicate to our citizens, that what they tell us is what they think is their experience, that we investigate that. And I know that, had you looked at all the evidence and something was inappropriate that maybe the gentleman didn't complain about, you would have written that on the form, even though he maybe didn't say that, because that's your position. So I don't think we do ourselves a service in the community when people do complain about things, especially in terms of discrimination, and we don't at least take it seriously enough. I mean, that you're investigating it, then we should need to list it. So when when this person gets their report back and it says on there, what the rules are and what the ruling is, that they know we took seriously what their complaint was, and then they don't come back in here saying, see, you didn't even take me seriously, and so on and so forth. So since you investigated it anyway, I think it's worth it to put on this form and the letter.
Okay.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Alderman Fleming, I think as the commander indicated, under Illinois statute, we will investigate what has been sworn. We cannot investigate things that have not been sworn. And so we will continue to do that. I don't want anyone to hear this discussion in person or otherwise and think we do not take every complaint seriously. But we have to do this within the context of appropriate local law and state law, and we will continue to do that. The council and the mayor have appointed a committee to continue to review how we handle citizen complaints. If the council wishes to make changes to that, we will have to measure those changes against state law. And if the state allows us to do that, we will move forward. If our collective bargaining agreements allow that, we will move forward. If they do not, and the council wishes us to pursue something differently, then we'll have to continue to talk about that. But I don't want anyone here not to think that every complaint is taken seriously, but it's taken seriously within the context of appropriate local and state law.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager, and I also want to make sure that this committee doesn't turn into the place where people feel that they can bring their complaints, and because that's not what this, we have a lot of work that we do on this committee that covers a huge area of human services, and as Mr. Ford said, that's, unless we change the rules, that's not appropriately held here, and for the reasons the City Manager has outlined, I think we're going in the right direction with this, and I'm very happy with the committee and your service on the committee. I think we're heading in the right direction, but I just don't want this committee to turn into the place where everybody comes and starts cross-examining people in the police department and everyone else, because that's not what they're
And
doing.
Madam Chair, I really need to stress that everyone here has rights. The residents of Evanston, the individuals who feel that they've had interaction that they're concerned about, as we have outlined and we have done for a number of years, there are options to do that. But we also have a responsibility to the men and women of the Evanston Police Department who every single day go out in this community and keep us safe.
Right.
And we have to balance that. And it's a hard thing. We're one of the few communities in Illinois grappling with this, certainly among only a handful that are seriously grappling with this in this country. But we have to make sure that everyone's rights are protected. Everyone's rights are protected.
Right. Thank you, Mr. City Manager.
On the change in process.
Not right now. Not right now.
How do I get information
Not-
on what you've stated then?
Not right now. You can talk with the city manager. I'm sure he'd be happy to speak with you. But this is a discussion that's happening up here on the committee. Are there any other comments on that? If not, we'll move to the equity and empowerment update. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the City Council. I'm Patricia Effiam, the Equity Empowerment Coordinator for the City of Evanston.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Do you want to give us an update?
Yes. So what we have done here, what is before you, is number one, is kind of what you have asked us to do, and a wealth of citizen input. The issue here before us now is how do we get moving? As you can see, there are people concerned about how we're going to move forward. I think that there is one of the biggest issues that I have run into is a misunderstanding. I have talked with several organizations who feel, how can I be represented? This whole process is meant to represent everybody and empower everyone. The Equity Empowerment Commission is meant so that people can come and be a representative of certain communities. It is our goal to make sure that that is a very inclusive body. But the rest of it, what I have before you is the plan for how do we get moving from here. And so as you can see, we've asked for city council actions that have pretty much been taken, but then now our next step is to begin to get to this issue of equity training. We need a lot of clarity around the language, around a common language. What is equity? How do we talk about equity? And with the community engagement. It's critically important. I have met with a vast array of folk who want to be included, and how do we hear those voices becomes important. So the training for the staff, the training for the council, and community engagement are critical pieces. The empowerment does come, and I think some of what we were talking about with the police tonight is actually in part of this empowerment. The empowerment comes through the entire process, but in the beginning, what we're trying to do is empower people to know what their rights are. I think that's a big issue, is what are my rights? If I feel discriminated against, who do I go to? Who do I talk to? And so that's the piece that we're working on right now. And then I think it's vitally important. We have heard our citizens, and I think is vitally important to make sure that we are examining from taking a step back and examining our hiring policies, our employment policies, how we employ people, how we discipline staff, and such. And so I think we're ready, hopefully, to take off with this and begin moving so that the citizens do feel as if we are finally taking some action that will support them.
Any questions from the committee? Alderman Fleming and then Alderman Braithwaite.
Yeah, so my question is about this community engagement 3A. I remember Alderman Ruth Simmons and I talked about, a lot of focus groups and chatting and such. So how is this different than, I feel like, the direction we gave last time, which was to get to work and cool back on the meetings?
Well, that's exactly what this does. I mean, what this does is it pulls us back from those general conversations that we have to have before we move. This is in conversation. For example, I've been on the phone with Case today and several days before this, and they're very concerned about how can we ensure that the voices of people living with disabilities are heard. That's what those focus groups keep us moving in the direction and being inclusive. But that is not any work that we do before we begin the work. That is part of the work to ensure our citizens, our residents, that we are being intentional about trying to hear and understand how we can connect with these communities.
Alderman Ruth Simmons, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Effiam, you said this very well the very first time that you came up to the podium. So I'll summarize and then I'll ask you to put in your own words. I think in going out and in doing your outreach and when you speak to the average resident, I think it's unfair that you've sort of been handed this big boulder to carry, and that is to solve all the many, many years of racial injustice and everything else that goes along with each ism. And I think you said it very well in terms of the purpose of your position, and it was really to look at what we do internally and how we deliver services to the residents. And I don't know if you said it or someone else is, we could go and try that crazy task of changing the community, but at the end of the day, if you still have to come back and deal with our city staff and the issues that we have, then we would have gained nothing.
Right.
And so I think to hear that again in your own words in terms of what you're tasked with as it relates to the HR responsibilities, because that's something that myself and other members of City Council pay very close attention to, may help the other individuals to kind of understand the scope of your work as we are getting started with it.
Yeah.
And then if they have any concerns or specific questions, how to access you to make sure that we're delivering their services. Because I would never ask you or any one individual to go out and change the community by yourself.
Right.
Even with community partners at Evanston Township, District 65, Northwestern. I mean, as a city, as a town, Cradle Career, we're really trying to tackle this. So I will stop talking and ask you to
Yes, certainly.
respond to that.
And I thank you for asking that question, because I think that that's a critical issue here and I have spoken with so many residents. I mean, the phone calls I take on a daily basis about, well, this was police brutality and this was this and this was what I'm trying to get people to understand is the purpose of this office. Number one is to make sure that there is equity in all city services, that all of our residents are receiving equitable services. And that, for me, that definitely includes making sure that the staff understands how we interact with different populations. And so that training piece is to ensure that as we're taking calls, as we're going out to the residents, as we're dealing with whatever, that we are thinking about and making sure that we are bringing equitable services to everybody. The point of this process that I have laid out here is just exactly that, is I cannot refuse to be the voice of every group of people. I would do them a disservice, right? And so this allows everybody to have input. You can come to the Equity Empowerment Commission, you can apply to be a commissioner, you can come to the commission, we will have open comment, we will bring that back to the Human Services Committee, and the other ways that we are engaging people is in, as we develop the equity training. Again, I was talking with Case today and said, can you all help us to understand how we shape training around dealing with people who have physical disabilities? And so this is very much an engagement process process once we get it up and going. Then people can plug into it. And again, a point of our website down here is the whole point is people just don't have any clear direction about how to file a complaint or what a complaint really is. And so, you know, our website will line that out so that people know, where do I go in case of this? And so the important thing here is not for me to be a diversity officer, not for me to resolve the individual issues that people are facing, but rather to look at as a whole, how are our policies inequitable, and how can we strengthen those policies? I'll give you an example with the budget. We're looking at the budget cuts right now, and I'm going through all of those and examining how many people of color are impacted by this, how many programs in a particular ward will be impacted, how many dollars will come out of one particular ward or out of one particular department. And so those are the overarching policies that we want to get to and look at, because that's what's going to resolve our inequity in our communities. It really, I mean, we have to get to the root issue and the root causes.
Alderman Ruth Simmons.
Thank you. So 3B and the Develop a Language Access Plan. I want to support the resident that spoke to the barrier and the voice not being heard. Could you give me a little more information on what that plan looks like? Is it a liaison? Is it support staff that speaks to the Latino community, a liaison for the disabled community, one for refugees? How do we make sure that they're being included?
Okay. And that's so the whole point is this is actually a policy we would be looking to bring to City Council to give us some direction on what information should be translated, which languages should it be translated into. You know, I mean, you probably all know, and I think the woman spoke very nicely to it, translation is incredibly expensive. Just to have that sign translated into Spanish was $970. And so we did end up reaching out to the high school, and they are loaning us their translation services so that we don't have to bear that cost. But in terms of, should our website be in multiple languages? At what point, at what percentage, when we reach a certain percentage of the population, should we consider translating certain materials? Should it be emergency materials? So that the whole idea is, and communities are doing this, they have done this quite well, but the whole idea is to sort through when do we create programs and offerings, when do we produce those materials in alternate languages, including, I mean, you've got Braille, you have a ton of things. So we need a policy to give direction to city staff about when we do that. And we also have to begin to build that into the budget, because it's quite an expensive undertaking.
Couple questions. One, are we talking about the sign that says all are welcome or something?
All people are welcome.
And so that costs $900 and...
To have it translated into the Spanish translation, yes, $970.
All people are welcome.
All 4 letters, 4 words. All people are welcome.
So I'll move beyond that.
But yes, but just to reassure you, we reached out to. Anyway, we've gotten all of the translations donated to us. And so if you imagine, I had this plan translated, and I don't have the exact figure, but it was around $1,200 to get 3 pages translated into the Spanish language. And so we need a policy. What do you want the staff to translate? Should the website, yeah.
I would recommend that we have staff that can be that voice and communicate directly with those communities instead of a translator, to make sure that the outreach is happening and that we're clear on the exchange of information and expectations of the city to the community members.
So I'm not clear. Tell me what you're asking for.
I'm asking that we, this language access plan, that it be more than just a translation, but support, whether it is a liaison like was suggested or a staff support of your own that can do the outreach with you, because it might be complicated to have community meetings and other outreach, and there's a language barrier.
No, I'm sorry, I probably am not being clear here. This is a team of folk that would get together to develop a policy that directs us about when we need to have translation services available, whether it's people who come in and speak different languages. I know we have a list of staff currently who offer translation services, but this is a policy that will direct us. For example, it will say, city council meeting packets must also be in Spanish. It will give us that kind of clarity and direction. So it is not my intention. Like as you said, I couldn't possibly do that. It's to set up a policy to give us some guidelines and direction.
Okay. Alderman Braithwaite?
I'm going to take a stab at something because I hear the 2 points that Alderman Simmons brings up, and I think you called out one thing very well, and that is that I heard from your statement, Alderman Simmons, is that so each, and I'll use, since we have people here from the Spanish-speaking community, and I think the city manager can help to provide clarity in this. So let's use Spanish-speaking population.
Yes.
The police department has a Spanish-speaking liaison.
Okay.
I believe they also have someone from the LGBTQ community as well, for an example.
Yes.
I would assume city manager and most of our departments, we have someone well represented within the Spanish-speaking community that could provide that access that I think I heard you asking for. But then the question is, how do you utilize that person in what you're trying to do citywide? So you're here, you've asked the question, we have a representative, I think, in each department that can help provide the services, and now the question is, how does it fold into the larger equity strategy?
Chair Fisk, Alderman Braithwaite, members of the committee. I think the point that Dr. Ephraim is making is such an important one, because I think we've done such a poor job of this over a period of time. It's not a matter of saying we have X employee that represents an entire group of people. That's not what we want to try to do.
Right.
I think what Dr. Ephraim is saying with this plan is we need to make sure that every group that wants to interact with us, and whatever special needs, what special issues there may be, that we're able to deal with them throughout all departments. Not, for many years, those of you who've been on the council for a while will know we had one staff member who was the Spanish language staff member. Adelita Hernandez. And any time someone spoke Spanish, the alarms went off and Adelita went running down the stairs to help the person.
Right.
Extraordinary individual, smart person, helped people. That's no way to run a railroad. We need to have people in all parts of our organization either have employees that are there in Parks and Rec and police and fire at the revenue office. If we don't have the employee there, that we have access to an employee or access to a third party, oral language. There are many ways to get that. There are services we already subscribe to that will give us someone on the telephone. Again, that's not something new. Other communities have been using this for a long time. What's here is a plan so that we can go to the Spanish-speaking community. We can go to the Eastern Europeans who are here, many languages that are involved, and say we're prepared to deal with everyone that comes here. It's not just one employee we're going to call and have them run downstairs when someone of that language speaks. So I think that's what we're trying to do. I think we need to balance costs associated with for example, a printed translation. It can be very expensive. It may make sense for us over time to say, okay, a collateral duty for an employee is translation. Anna Sanchez, for example, a collateral duty for her is to help with translation. She does other very important things to help us in this organization, but a collateral duty is to help with translation. We may end up having 3 or 4 employees. I don't want to say to Enith or any other person, you're our Spanish-speaking employee, so sit there and wait till someone needs something translated. That's not a way I think we need to move forward. And what Dr. Ephraim is saying with this plan is let's be systematic about it. Let's make sure that we're able to address everyone without going back to that, I think, outmoded way of doing business.
And if I could add to that, I think some clarity. What we have found is that translation is not as simple as it seems. Not everybody can translate just because you speak the language. And people tell you that not everybody can translate. There's an American Translators Association that does specialized translation. Apparently, we have made some goofs trying to go to Google Translator, and it's not a good translation system. And so, I think we do have some resources available to us, both from Northwestern. We reached out to the Islamic community who translate the Arabic for us. And so we do have some options, but not everybody who speaks the language can translate that. So it becomes very complicated. The other issue is you have different dialects, even in Spanish. You have Catalan and you have, Spanish from Mexico. So you have these different, so you have to be clear that you are reaching everybody. And then I just like to add to what Wally said is it's incredibly difficult for someone who's holding a job and is trying to keep their job and has to run back and forth and up and down and translate for the water bill. So this just puts in place, number one, who are our resources, when can we access them, when do you all expect that we will absolutely have translation services available. So I said it's a system that will go into place after much study. We have Savannah Clement who did this with the city of Chicago, who will sit on this committee and help us to think through policy.
Okay, Alderman Ruth Simmons, but just before that, I'm going to suggest that you contact Rotary International. They have a translation department.
Thank you.
And see what software they use. Alderman?
So I just wanted to say that, yes, that is the goal, that every department can manage every community, but I want to state again, I think that during your outreach effort, that there is someone there to communicate with the communities. And so I don't know if that is an appointed person on the committee, a liaison, and maybe it's not a staff person, but clearly there has been some disconnect and there's some room for opportunity in communicating with the different communities.
Great.
Okay, everybody good? Any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Alderman Fleming.
So this is just feedback. You don't need to answer this, but when you have equity training for Train the Trainer, I hope that you are looking at training that deals with equity, particularly in government, and not diversity and inclusion training. I think that many people have completed that already, and I would hate for staff to be checked out of the process early because the training is not applicable. I also, I guess, would like to hear more at another time on the monitor discrimination complaints that's going to happen in the commission, because you have also here on the website that the website is going to be a place to give information about discrimination. And so I don't know if that's you're taking complaints about discrimination and you're investigating it, or it's just like these are the departments within wherever that you can. But I guess I would like that, as I voiced with the police complaint process, to make sure if we're taking people's complaints or they're giving complaints, and then however you're receiving that information about complaints, that is taken seriously and that people see what we are doing with those and where those are going to change their experience here within, city council or the city building. So I would be very mindful of when you're collecting that information that we're communicating that. And then I guess my last thing is just the plan overall. I'm trying to remain hopeful, but I am losing some hope. It looks good on paper, but as this population has talked about their frustrations, I know I've communicated some other frustrations that folks have in the community, and I'm really concerned as we go into budget season, whatever your equity findings are with that, and depending on how this really is laid out and received within the community, that people, I don't want this to be something where people say, oh, you remember that time we did the equity stuff and spent all that money and didn't get anywhere? So I'm very mindful of that. I think we have an opportunity to do some really great work. We listened to presentations by 65 and 202, and they are light years ahead of us. So I think we have an opportunity within the city to do something really great. But I would really like to see the commitment, from the council, from the city manager, from the mayor, and that we all do the hard work to support and get this done the right way the first time.
Everybody good? Any other comments? Okay, then we've reached the end of our agenda. Are there any items for communication, Kimberly? Anything? Okay, we don't have an executive session, so is there a motion to adjourn? Second. I just want to thank you all. This is my last meeting as chair. Alderman Braithwaite takes over in November, and I'm very pleased to say that. Kimberly, thank you.